Hello, everyone. Thank you for attending our webinar. We are just giving 1 minute so everyone can join the webinar. Just one more second. Okay. So one more time, good morning, everyone. I would like to thank you on behalf of the Brazil Germany Chamber of Commerce and Industry, São Paulo, for attending our webinar. The topic of today's webinar is requirements and solutions for suppliers verification under LkSG and CSDDD. Our speaker today is Klaus Burkhardt, a specialist in transportation. Klaus has an in-depth knowledge of global trade routes, the flow of goods, and the complex process associated with them. He has more than 30 years' experience in managing global companies. Most recently, he was on the board of a mobility and payment service company responsible for operations, legal, and compliance in Europe. And he's a co-founder and COO of Cargodian GmbH, our sponsor of the webinar also. He represents on the topic a digital solution for international supply chain verification. Our other speakers is Andrea Zanden. He's a founding partner of Pacheco Neto Zanden Teixeira law firm and member of the Brazilian Bar Association, OAB, São Paulo chapter. As well, he's a member of German Bar Association, specializing in cross-border transactions between Germany and Brazil. Andreas has, over the past 25 years, advised Germany foreign investors in Brazil. He's also a director of the German-Brazil Chamber of Commerce and Industry, São Paulo. He represents on the topic new legal requirements regarding supply chains in Europe in its impacts in Brazil. At the end of the webinar, we will have a Q&A session, but if you have any questions, you can send in the chat or in the Q&A tab below. You can send and we'll read them and answer within the webinar. So one more time, I want to thank everybody for attending the webinar, and no further ado, I want to give Andreas the floor. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I don't know if you perceive that I have some problems with the because there was how do you say in German a Stromausfall when we talked together, and then suddenly there was no light, nothing. So I hope I don't know what is on the street, so I don't hope we will be interrupted the next 20 minutes. Thank you for having me on this webinar. It's I think it's in the schedule of every companies especially in Europe, but also here in Brazil, the ESG. And in this relationship, the ESG is with ESG. There's also a lot of movements regarding to improve human rights and environmental matters, which are already normally regulated by international resolutions. But the Germany and the European Union, they have made special legislation. The Germans were first. They have since 2023, they have a law which is in force, which has in German, it has the very nice name of Lieferketten-Sorgfaltspflichtengesetz, which is a very long word, but it's meaning it's a lot about corporate due diligence obligations for companies to improve the human rights and environmental matters in the supply chain. Elena, can you go to the next slide? I asked Elena to help me because I'm not so good in the technical things. So as I told you, I will give a little overview about the German law because it's already in force. The European guideline will be in force from 26 on, and it's really mostly or very strongly based on the German law. This German law with respect to the DDD obligations on supply chains has basically three matters. It's regulating the assessment of risk to environment and human rights. There are the establishing preventive and corrective measures, and reporting and documental requirements, which have to be done annually on an annually basis. You will see the law is not directly directed to the foreign companies, especially in Brazil, for example, but indirectly they will be attached by this new regulations. Can you go to the next? So the companies who have to observe this law there are two requirements. They have to be their headquarter in Germany. This means also if you have a branch from a foreign company, if you have a branch in Germany, if you have to follow these rules, if you have at least 1,000 employees in Germany. And for this accounting of the 1,000 employees, you have to include also the group workers, if you have a group in Germany, and also agency workers. Next, please. The law has a long list of rights, of prohibitions regarding the human rights and the environmental. They are especially preoccupied with the child labor. So there's a lot of cases which have to be observed, and if in the risk assessment, if there is exploitation of child labor, of slavery, sale, trafficking of children, debt bondage, and all these kind of things, which sometimes we are not used in Germany, and even not so in Brazil, but in many countries of the world, there is still a lot of abuse of child work. So this is one of the big preoccupations of this law. Also, the next slide, please. With regard to the occupational safety and health obligations, which is also a big issue for the German law, and also to some labor issues like disregarding the freedom of association, unequal treatment in employment, and withholding an adequate living wage. There's a longer list, but I don't think it. If somebody is really interested, we can see more. But I think it is important to strengthen that the important thing is that they want to eliminate the abuse of child work, the unsafety health conditions, and an unequal treatment of the labor works. The other occupation is the environmental. So there's also a big list with issues which they are preoccupied. The most important, I think, is also is always related to products and the use of mercury. There are some international treatments where they establish how to handle this issue, and this is one of the most important preoccupations for the environmental issue, and also the treatment of waste. So there are they established various examples where what you have where you have a risk, and where you have to make this assessment and to try to reduce or even to eliminate all this risk regarding with the mercury especially, but also with some other chemical products and the waste. Can you go to the next? The supply chain, which is affected, is actually very broad. It goes from the extraction of raw materials to the delivery to the end consumer. So everybody in this chain is affected, and the company which has to observe these rules, they have to assess the risk on all this chain. So upstream, downstream, you have to be aware that you have to make assessments with regard to all this supply chain, indirect and direct and indirect suppliers have to be verified. And well, this Klaus will be talking more about, especially about this issue. But so the supply chain is very broad. Can you go to the next? So in order to assess and to minimize all these risks and maybe violations, there are the law established several mechanisms which has to be implemented by in this first step by the German companies, which is basically you have to make a management system where you ensure that your company and all the suppliers are able to identify risks in the supply chain, and if there is, if you have detected risks, to take certain measures to reduce, eliminate this risk. Therefore, you have to appoint a responsible person in your enterprise, in your company, which has to organize it internally for the company, and this system must be integrated in your operational process, so that you can always react if there is a risk or violation. And for this, you have to perform a regular risk analysis. You have to you have to verify if your own actions or the actions of your subsidiaries or direct suppliers and indirect suppliers, if if their actions may lead to an human rights or environmental risk, or if there is already a violation. And you have to, the company has to publish its human rights strategy. It has to publish it on its website. You have to lay down your preventive measures for your own business and the direct suppliers. So, which includes, for example, the development and implementation of appropriate procurement strategies and purchasing practices, or with respect to the suppliers, contractual assurance from a direct supplier that it will comply with the human rights and environmental expectations. If there is, you identify a risk or violation, you have to take remedial actions, which are normally trying to minimize and extend and end the violation. And in the, let's say, in the worst case, you have to end your business relationship with the supplier. But in the German law, it's really only if it's a very severe violation, and if there is no less severe mean, then you have to end it. One mechanism which is also very important, you have to implement a complaint procedure for the affected persons. So you have to provide an easy access for these affected persons, which means you have to look also what is the problem. For example, if you have analphabets, or people which have certain defects and all these kind of things, or there's language problem, you have to look how to you make it possible for such person also that they can bring their complaints to the company, or yeah, especially to the company. In case of human rights violation, you can also go to a German court through a German NGO or a German trade union. So you don't have to do it in your own country, or also in your own country, but you have the possibility to go to German courts. The implementing of due diligence procedures with regard to risks at indirect suppliers, which means actually you do it by this complaint procedure. You have to make it sure that that the employees of an indirect supplier can also bring its complaints to you as a company. Another important issue on this due diligence obligations are the reporting and documenting obligations. This has to be done on a continuous basis, so you have always updating your procedures, your documenting. You have to report. You have to make an annual report, which you have to publish on your website, and you have to keep this documentation for at least 7 years. To ensure all these obligations, that they are really that you are complaining with these obligations. Please, the next slide. They have that's an authority which is competent for all this law, which is in Germany. It's called Bundesamt für Wirtschafts- und Ausfuhrkontrolle, which is it's a department of the Ministry of Economy, and you have to submit your report regarding your strategigies and your measures you have taken with regarding to these obligations within the first month of every year. to the BAFA. And this BAFA, they have quite a lot of competences to with respect to this report. Well, they have even the right to enter and inspect your premises. They have rights to fine. So there's in order to if there is a breach of these obligations, there's a range of fines which go from 50,000 euros up to 2% of the net turnover. This depends always on which obligation you have breached. So there in the law, there's a long list of all these special points and which fine can apply to this. And well, at the one of the measures is also that if you have breached the obligations and you have been condemned, and it's you can exclude from public biddings by the authorities for a certain time. So summing up, so you have this. There are a determined number of enterprises which are subjected to this law. They have basically due diligence obligations, which are very detailed in the German law, and you have this reporting obligations, this annual reporting and documentation obligations. I'm coming now to the European legislation. They have recently, actually in May, it has been approved by the European Council, the called Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive. And it's based very strongly on the German law, but it has also widened the cases which are affected by this law, especially in the environmental system. So they have wider provisions, and as it has now been approved by the European Council, the members of the European Union have 2 years to implement legislation with respect to this issue, or if they, like Germany, for example, they have to adapt their legislation to the standards of the directive. And if in the case of Germany, I will come to some of the difference between these two laws. But if they have, if Germany has stricter rules than the European directive, it can maintain these stricter rules. If it has weaker rules, it has to be adapted to the European directive. In this directive, there's also an adjustment period. So what means that the companies which are affected, they are going from starting with 5,000 employees in 2026, and then goes down to also to 1,000 in 2029. And maybe you can give me the next slide. So maybe already the next slide, because there is so you can see when for the European companies, this 1,000 employees involved and an annual turnover of at least 450 million euros is regarding it's from 2029 on. Before it is 28, it's I think 3,000, and 27 it's 5,000. So what is also important to say, it's this is also this directive is applicable to non-European companies which are generating net turnover within the EU of at least 450 million euros. So with this measures, there are a lot more companies, foreign companies, will be affected by this law when they are doing business with European companies. Can you go to the next slide, please? So you can see the directive. They have the same subject, which is human rights, basically to slavery, child labor, abuse of workers, and also of environmental minimization of environmental damages. Basically also certain chemical, mercury, and waste management. The list is a little bit more extensive than this of the Germans, and they are also preoccupied with the climate change. So the directive has implemented an obligation for the companies which are affected by this law to adopt and implement transition plans for climate change mitigation. So this is and requirement which is not in the German law, but with what the Germans have also to implement. Can you go to the next slide, please? They have also financial sanctions, but they are higher. They can go up to 5% of the net global turnover. And they have also introduced a civil liability, which the German law especially expressively excluded, but the European directive has introduced it. So according to this directive, you may sue a person directly, officer or yes, maybe also the shareholder for civil liability. Yes, please, the next. This is I don't know if it's readable for you, but I take it this slide from a site from Tanso, Germany, where they made a little comparison of some points. So you see the scope is different a little bit between Germany and the European directive, especially with respect to the turnover. It's in the European directive, you have to have a net turnover of at least 450 million euros. So this will probably reduce a little bit the companies who are really affected. The requirements regarding ensuring environment protection and human rights are very similar. The fine, as I told you, is there's also a difference the possibility to fine up to 5% of your annual net turnover, and the question of the civil liability. This is what is affecting the companies directly, but for the foreign suppliers, what can you expect? We think you can expect that the affected companies, they will require a lot of information from the suppliers, from the direct and indirect suppliers, with regard to the compliance with human rights. They will take these issues, human rights and environmental expectation, into account and include them in their supplier assessment. They will take contractual measures that you as a supplier are complaining with this reporting and information issues, but also that you verify the risks which you have in your company and in your suppliers, and taking measures to end with this if there are risks or violations. Probably they will make the controls on their own or audits by independent third parties, which I think Klaus will talk about it. So the consequence, if you will not comply with this contractual requirements, probably you will have penalties. You have the risk that the business relationship will be suspended, and that you will be removed from the supplier list from these companies. On the other hand, there are also some opportunities, because maybe you can negotiate better sales prices and payment conditions if they are contributing to improve working time, environmental and social standards. So you have arguments for this. You will also improve your own competitiveness, and you will have more efficiency in your production process. As always, the challenge, or what is this, will be involving a lot of time and money. So this is what I have to say for the moment, and I will pass to Klaus to give you more details on the assessment and the analysis of risks.
Thank you, Andreas. And also, no further ado, Klaus, please, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Let me share my screen. And please let me know once you see it, if it's visible.
Yes, and if you can put it on the presentation mode.
It should be in the presentation mode.
Let's try one more time.
Let's try one more time.
Yeah. Maybe if you are using two screens, Klaus, I think you need to use just one, or the presentation mode doesn't appear to us.
Okay, how is it now? Which screen can you see?
Yes, now we can see the presentation.
Okay, so you can see the full screen and not my notes with all my little hints what I should say.
Yes.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, well, ladies, Andreas, thank you very much for the introduction. And to say it with the famous German writer, to say it with Goethe, all theory is gray, my friends, but forever green is the tree of life. And let's see if we can get some praxis into this very, very complex German law, what we have seen here. So this law, what Andreas already introduced, we have on one hand the German Supply Chain Due Diligence Act, or the wonderful German name, Lieferketten-Sorgfaltspflichtengesetz. And on the other hand, we have the European Union's Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive, which is basically the same thing. It's a little bit wider from a scope perspective, and it comes into force over the next 2 years in all European countries. So if you have thought that this law only applies to German companies, well, in the next 2 years, all European nation states will implement similar regulation to deal with these requirements resulting from the CSDDD, CSDDD. But let's have a look at the requirements in detail. So here is a summary of what basically is required from a German company, or within the next 2 years from any European company, to deal with the legal requirements. So they have to implement a company statement on human rights and a human rights strategy. They have to determine their organizational responsibilities. So who in my organization is in charge? And that has a lot to do with liability. They have to implement a risk management system. They have to do a continuous risk analysis. They have to implement a grievance or whistleblowing mechanism, what Andreas already mentioned. Then they have to work with preventive measures, with remedial measures. They have reporting duties to the authorities in Germany, to the BAFA, or in the equivalent authorities in other European states. And quite importantly, they have to involve the stakeholders. They have to assess the effectiveness of the whole system at least once a year. And they have to have a documentation in place. So as you see, ladies and gentlemen, the focus of the whole setup is on risk analysis, on risk assessment, on prevention and mitigation. And in the next couple of minutes, I'll take you through the process from both a German perspective, but also from a supplier perspective. So what happens to the suppliers? What do I have to do as a supplier if I want to continue to sell to a German company? Now, what you see now on screen is what are the implications for me, for companies selling, exporting to Europe? So this is our suggestions for you, how you could prepare for those requirements. And of course, we will share the slide afterwards, so you don't have to write this down, you don't have to take screenshots. We are going to share the slide deck. And when you look at all the requirements, what you have to fulfill, so to start with, one of the core elements is a risk analysis. And you have to map your supply chain, and you have to do a risk analysis on your supply chain. And it starts with a mapping of the supply chain. You know, it is very easy to identify your direct suppliers. That's all the companies you pay money to. That's your direct suppliers. But on the other hand, the law asks you to look into the supply chain itself. So for example, if you buy coffee beans in Hamburg, then you know pretty sure that no coffee grows in Hamburg. So there must be a supplier behind the supplier. So then you have to map your indirect suppliers. So if you have common knowledge, no coffee grows in Hamburg and also no rubber trees grow in Hamburg, then you have to map your indirect suppliers in addition to your direct suppliers and extend the risk analysis also to your indirect suppliers. Now, one sentence about the legal obligations. You do have the obligation to improve the situation with your suppliers and indirect suppliers. If it is within your own organization, let's say if you have your own coffee farms abroad, or if you have your own cacao farms abroad, or if you have your own rubber farms abroad, then you have the obligation to succeed. So then you cannot say, oh, I have tried, but I wasn't successful. This will not help you. If it's your own organization, you have to succeed. You have to improve the situation, no matter where on the planet. If it's a direct supplier or an indirect supplier, which is not your own organization, then you have the duty, the obligation to try it at least to improve the situation. So let's dive deeper now. Let's have a look at the required risk analysis, and let's start with the so-called generic risk analysis. So this is a screenshot from an automated data-driven global risk analysis of one of my customers in Europe. And we show the results of the generic risk analysis in risks by country. So here on screen, you see the example for Brazil. And we are working with traffic light colors. So here you can see already In Brazil, it's mostly green, a little bit orange. So in Brazil, we have medium to low risk. That explains also why, until now, from a lot of my customers, the focus was not so much on Brazil. The focus was on other countries and other regions of the world. Because if you would look at the risk analysis for Southeast Asia, or if you would look at the risk analysis for Asia, for India, for China, for Vietnam, you see a lot of different colors. It's not green and orange, it's orange and red. And of course, that determines your priorities. But coming back, let's look at this example now for Brazil. So the data analysis gives us a low to medium risk indication on both the human rights and the environmental topics, which Andreas mentioned earlier. But why does it give us a medium risk indication? So what is the source behind? What is the data source behind? Specifically, I'm showing here one example for the worst forms of child labor in the supply chain. So what we do is we do an automated analysis. We set into relation the industry, here, for example, coffee. We set in relation the country and the company, and we analyze various findings and data sources. And as data sources, we are using such from international organizations, NGOs, from the UNICEF, the United States Department of Labor, just to name a few. There is numerous international sources which deliver good quality, neutral quality data, which you can use for such data analytics. And the result is a medium risk analysis for child labor and forced labor on coffee in Brazil. And there is a long text explanation why that is the case. So this is one example how we are using data for an automated data analysis to determine risks in the supply chain. And even if you're, let's say, the seller of the coffee is in Hamburg, and you're a coffee roaster in Munich, and you buy that from the seller, from the trading company in Hamburg, as long as your coffee comes from another country, you have to map out the complete supply chain to really have a complete picture. And now, let's say if a German company is doing the risk analysis and they come back to this picture, that Brazil is giving medium to low risks, there is a couple of risks indications where they will dive into deeper. And here, for example, child labor in the coffee and forced labor in the coffee, they will do the next step. But that's not the only reason for a risk indication. Let me show you another practical example, what we find when we do a data-driven risk analysis. Ladies and gentlemen, we also look at what does the world know about the company? You know, in times of internet, it's fantastic. You can find a ton of information. And we also look at the ownership structure of a company. Because it's quite important to understand who are the owners of my business partner, who is really behind, and do I know anything about those people? And for example, one of the parameters we are checking is the list of sanctions. So we check the ownership structure of a company, and we are checking for sanctions. Now, especially for companies in Germany, in the European Union, in the United States, that's very relevant. Because of the current political situation, we have to check for sanctions. And many Russian companies or oligarchs have divested. They have divested to Vietnam, they have divested to India, they have divested heavily into Arabian countries, into Turkey, but they are still on the list of sanctions. So those individuals are still sanctioned. And of course, if you have a sanction match, so once the company in Europe or in the US is aware that there is a sanction match in the ownership structure of an entity, then it is very difficult to do business with those, because either they are not able of doing business with such business partner at all, or only under heavy scrutiny and by approval of the controlling authorities in the respective country. So this is also something what we check with automated daily data analytics. And especially when we analyze the adverse media. So adverse media is basically everything on negative media, what you can find on a company and its owners on the internet. I'd like to show with you one real life example from one of our other customers. So here we have monitored a Vietnamese company. This Vietnamese company is the global market leader in producing sweets for Christmas trees. So all the stuff that is hard sugar sweet you hang on Christmas trees. The global market leader is a Vietnamese company. They're based in Ho Chi Minh City. And the owner of the company has been sentenced in Vietnam for child trafficking and forced child labor. Now, of course, this gives you a very high risk indication. So here, all the obligations from the law kick in that you have to get in touch with your supplier in Vietnam and to have a conversation about what is the risk and what are you doing? Do you really have children on the work floor? What is happening there? So this is one of the examples I wanted to share with you. In addition, and this is also something what Andreas already mentioned earlier, the companies in Europe, they all have opened globally accessible whistleblowing tools. So in those whistleblowing tools, individuals globally are able to report issues and to report cases. So for example, the employees from your supplier, no matter where the supplier is located, or any other stakeholder, for example, the little village next to a factory, they can log a report or a complaint. And then for example, the employee of your supplier in Vietnam or that village next to the factory, they can log that report. Then the German company will have to start a formal investigation. They have to understand if there is substance to the report in view of the obligations from the Supply Chain Due Diligence Act to protect human rights, to protect the environment, and to see if there is a risk of violation. But also, what we are analyzing is the global political stability, because it has significant impact on your supply chain if there is a deteriorating stability situation with a specific country. And we have a current example. We see the war in Ukraine that has devastating effect on Ukraine itself, but also on the neighboring countries. We see the current Israel-Iran situation, and we do have suppliers in Israel. We do have suppliers in Lebanon. So here also you have a significant risk indication where you need to get in touch with your suppliers to see what's really happening and how the situation can improve. And now, ladies and gentlemen, even the best automated super duper software tool analysis only can give you an indication. Once you have an indication, the next step is to validate such risk indication. And this is really the daily business, the practical business where we are helping our customers with to do this in an efficient way. So I'd like to show two different options how to validate a risk indication. One option is to use questionnaires, to send out questionnaires to your business partner, like, okay, I have a risk indication, I send a questionnaire, my business partner, my supplier answers the questions, and the answers are processed again in an automated way to help me to determine, do I have really a risk or even a violation? Or is it really nothing and just a storm in a water glass? The other alternative, what we are doing, when we look at this, at the automated data-driven sheets, here is an example on screen. But the other alternative, what we are doing, we are helping our customers to go to the suppliers and do a so-called social due diligence audit. Now, my company, we have an office in Southeast Asia, we have an office in Malaysia, and we regularly do audits in Southeast Asia, where we go into companies and we do a social due diligence audit to check for the obligations of the Supply Chain Due Diligence Act, if we can observe any risks or violations. But also, we are working with the German chambers, and if, for example, you want to send an audit to your supplier in Vietnam, then you can book that via our software tool, and we will send an auditor from the German chamber to that supplier in Vietnam, and that works with nearly all countries around the globe where the German chambers offer that service, to go there and to do a reality check. And ladies and gentlemen, this is something I can tell you from my own experience, because I'm doing this on a regular basis. I'm very close to business, I'm very close to practice. I spend approximately half of my time in factories around the globe and helping companies to improve their human rights situation, to improve their environmental situation. And there is a big gap in what German companies think that's happening and what's really happening out there in reality in business life. Now, once you have all the facts on table, so for example, you have the questionnaire, you have maybe an audit report, you have the analysis of the data, everything is at your hand, then you do a risk evaluation. Then you look at the details, and then you have to evaluate the risk. Then you do a risk assessment and you determine, do I have a risk? And if I have a risk, what is my preventive measures? Or what is my corrective measures? What is the next step, how to do this? And again, from our software tool, you can initialize this automatically. And then, of course, it includes a complete measurement tool where you can manage all the measures you have taken and will help indicate you where you're on course or where you're deviating from course. That means where something is not going well as it should be. Now, what Andreas already mentioned earlier, the German Supply Chain Due Diligence Act gives the authority, the BAFA, a right to audit you. And that goes over a period of 7+1 years, because they always can audit you for the full period, and the full period where you have to be documented is 7 years, and then they have 1 year to come and knock your door. So in total, you have to document always 8 years, where you need to have a flawless documentation, why you have decided on which risk indication and what you have done. And you know, this is quite important, because mostly when I come into companies now, most of my customers, they do a risk management. They have a great risk management. They're using Microsoft Excel. And they have agreed certain measures with their suppliers. It's all in email conversations. It's all in email inboxes. But once the person with the email inbox leaves the company, or once the Excel sheet is messed up and not available anymore, then you have really difficulties to have a solid documentation over a period of 8 years to be able to show the controlling authority what you have done. Now, this concludes a very short insight on data-driven, automated, and continuous risk analysis. Here in that slide are a few pages I would like to share with you, which describe our solution. So this is the advertising part, which describe our solution and our service. And until today, we have done more than 500,000 automated risk assessments for our customers, and we have in daily monitoring approximately 500,000 companies globally, where we run a daily risk analysis for our customers on those suppliers. We have done social due diligence audit in Malaysia, in Vietnam, in Indonesia, in Thailand, and in China. And that also, and this is what I mentioned earlier, this is where the current high-risk countries are located. This is really where you have lots of high-risk indications, and not so much in Brazil, for example. And that is why maybe you have received less questionnaires or less questions or less audits from your customers in Germany until now in Brazil. But as all European countries are now going to implement such regulation within the next 2 years, you can expect that more companies adopt similar tools, that you as a Brazilian company get more questions. They will send you possibly questionnaires. Maybe they want to send you an auditor to check the situation on site. So be prepared. We also have that slide in the presentation, what you could do to prepare. And that, ladies and gentlemen, brings me to the end of this short overview on risk analysis in supply chains. And yeah, as Helena already said, now we are coming to the part where we are happy to go through your questions.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Klaus and Andreas, for your beautiful presentations. I think was very clear and very helpful to everybody here. I want to ask if anyone has any questions. You can raise hands. We saw some raised hands, so feel free to write on the chat or in the Q&A, or you can open your microphone if you are comfortable with it. Please let me know if anyone has any questions. Just let's give everybody a second. But I really think the presentation was very clear and very helpful. So people are gonna think a lot about it and gonna implement a lot on their workspace, no doubt. Andreas, do you have any questions? Do you have any further comments? Or Klaus, do you have any further comments? Feel free also to make any comments you will. I don't see for now any questions.
Maybe only as Klaus mentioned, Brazil is I think we are not still aware of all this situation, but I'm sure that especially with the European directive, that this will be more and more an issue. I don't know. I read recently in the newspaper that there I don't know if it's the employees or indirect suppliers from BASF, which is BASF. They made a complaint in Germany. So I can imagine that this is related to this wonderful Lieferketten-Sorgfaltspflichtengesetz.
Yes.
So I can imagine there will be a lot of more complaints in Germany because the German law gives this right to affected person in Brazil or all over the world. So I can imagine that this will be there will be a lot of more complaints over the next years in Germany.
Now, also from a practical point of view, our customers have received several complaints from organizations and individuals outside Europe. For example, we have received, or our customer has received one complaint from the employees of a dental implant manufacturer in Vietnam. In Vietnam, most of the dental implants for Western Europe are produced. And they have complained about the working conditions, that they have to work under very bad working conditions. And that's a very serious case. And that's an ongoing investigation. We also have received a complaint from, indeed, and that's why I used it as an example, from a local village next to a plant in Malaysia. And the local village complains about the noise and says, we have a real issue with this factory here. The factory is so loud, it impacts our village life. We cannot have a proper village life anymore. It's just too loud. So these are real life examples which are happening right now, where there are real life complaints going on.
Yeah. Thank you, Klaus. We have two questions here in the Q&A. The first one is, what's the minimum size of a supplier to be impact? I don't know.
Oh yeah, that's a good one. There is no size definition for the supplier. So suppliers of any size are impacted. For the German companies, the minimum size right now is at least 1,000 employees. As Andreas said, for the CSDDD, it will go to 1,000 employees or 450 million euro turnover until 2029. But for the supplier, there is no minimum size. And I have done an audit at a factory in Vietnam with 200 employees. I have done an audit at a factory in Malaysia with 250 employees. So also smaller companies are audited, because for the suppliers, there is no real size definition.
Yeah. Thank you, Klaus. We have one more question. How do we start this process through the ports in a greenfield format? I don't know if
yeah. Yeah, I'm just thinking how to start, because
okay.
Greenfield is always Greenfield is great, because when you start on a greenfield, you can define it from scratch. Where we usually start with our customers is we look at the complete supply structure. So we look at all suppliers, we look at all direct suppliers and indirect suppliers globally. And then we start mapping those, and we do a risk analysis on the countries and industries, and we do a risk analysis on the individual companies. And then we process it really by priority. We look who are the biggest suppliers, who are the most or the highest risk indications on the suppliers, and then we take it from the top. We take those companies with the highest supply turnover, plus with the highest risk indications, and we work our way slowly down. And we see quite a huge difference by industry. You know, when we have, for example, in the machinery industry with a heavy supply structure in Southeast Asia, we do have very high risk indications. For example, we have lots of customers who are hospitals, because in Germany also hospitals fall under this act, and every hospital has implemented a supply chain risk analysis. For the hospitals, we see a very low risk indication. So with hospitals, it's usually typically a lower risk indication, because the medical business, the hospital business, is a very strongly regulated business. The suppliers are under scrutiny globally to fulfill certain standards. So here you have very low risk indication. But for example, one of our customers is a solar panel company. They produce solar panels, and they have globally approximately 10,000 suppliers. And they have a heavy supply structure in China. Here it's a different story. Then you really start to do social audits in China, because you have a complete different risk indication. So coming back to the question, it's great to start on a white piece of paper. It's great to start on greenfield. You start to map your supply structure. You do a risk analysis on the countries first. You do a risk analysis on the companies and the individuals, and then you start processing the risk by importance.
Yeah, it's a huge field to be explored. So thank you very much, Klaus, for your inputs. Were very good. And of course, if anyone has any doubts, you can count on the Brazil-German Chamber, and with Cargodian, of course, we are totally available to help anyone out with any questions and any points to implement about the law. So if we don't have any more questions, I want to thank one more time Andreas and Klaus for your beautiful presentations, and on behalf of the Brazil Germany Chamber, São Paulo, São Paulo, I want to thank everybody for attending and wish a very good day. And for Klaus, a very good, sorry, we have one more question here. Sorry, it's in Portuguese. Just give me a second. I'm gonna make it in English. Just one quick second, sorry. Here in Brazil, we are also having some discussion for a similar law, drafting the National Human Rights and Business Policy. One of the issues we are discussing online to also meet international demands, such as LkSG, would be a creator of a CO certificate classifying a Brazilian company as okay in relation to Brazilian standards. Would this type, I think, Klaus, would this type of local, whereas Brazilian certification be accepted? Do you think maybe in the future would be accepted by LkSG?
The answer is a very loud and clear, yeah, no. So it's a yes and it's a no. It's both. Why? Because the German Control Authority, the BAFA, has issued a statement where they say such local certificates, such local certifications, they can be one piece of the puzzle, but you still have to do a risk as a German company. You still have to do a risk analysis. You still have to do a risk assessment, and you cannot only trust a certificate. So the certificate is one piece of the puzzle, But the underlying structure to do a risk analysis, to do a risk assessment, you cannot stop doing that because there is a certificate. You might look at the certificate once you have a number of risk indications. Then you could say, okay, this certificate helps me on this, and this risk indication. But it only can be one piece of the puzzle. You cannot trust it. And when we look at the civil liability, the European CSDDD already clearly says it's no exculpation. So you can not find a resolution in saying, oh, I got this certificate. So that will not help you. It will not help you in any civil liability case. It will not help you against the authorities. It's one piece of the puzzle where you can use it, but it will not lead to exculpation.
Perfect. Perfect. Thank you very much, Klaus. Yeah. So please contact us about the certification and we will help you. No problem at all. Thank you so very much. I think now we answered all the questions. Let me see. Yeah. Okay. So now one more time, thank you very much, Klaus and Andreas, and everyone for attending, and have a really good day. And for Klaus, I have a good evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Have a good day. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.